Welcome to another edition of Ronde and Tiki, presented by Superbook Sports. This is week number 9, episode 10, because we started, the week before. Rondé, when we started the week before, did you think that all of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL would be out of the league? Not all of them, but I mean, the number of injuries to starting quarterbacks is alarming. It can't be good for the NFL.
It can't be. Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, he'll play. Stafford always plays. He's a tough dude. Desmond Ridder, he should be hurt because he's not very good. He can't hold on to football. Kenny Pickett's a big one. Obviously, your New York Football Giants already have Daniel Jones out. And then Tyrod Taylor gets hurt. And then who came into that game? What's his name?
Tommy DeVito.
DeVito? Is he a lineage guy? Should we all know who DeVito? I mean, we all know the name. Is he related to anybody, or is he just
Well, on the NFL Sunday show on CBS, I think it was Coach Cowher called him Danny DeVito.
When you're thinking about DeVitos, you should not be thinking about quarterbacks in the NFL.
No, you're right. He's a local legend, though. He went to Don Bosco, or one of the local schools, maybe Bergen Catholic. I think it was Don Bosco. Syracuse kid, transferred to Illinois. But when you don't allow your quarterback to throw the ball at all in a game that he has to play more than 2.5 quarters in, then you're likely going to lose, even though the Giants somehow were in winning position with 24 seconds left on the clock.
Tell me about that. I mean, you did this game, and I apologize that you had to call one of the sorriest games of all time. I mean, it was like and it was raining.
Mm-hmm.
Good thing you were in the booth, because watching at home, it looked like the most miserable day possible. But tell me this. Saquon has 36 carries. This guy is a professional quarterback. He made the team. How can you not allow him to throw a football?
Well, part of it was the weather, I think. And Coach Dable basically said, even if Tyrod was playing, we would have not thrown the ball that much, but not at all. And the only time they did throw the ball once it got in overtime, it was swing routes to Saquon Barkley. But we knew when this game got ugly that Saquon was going to get the majority of the carries. But the question then became, how do you win the game if it becomes a field position battle? And your punt, every time you punt, you're giving them like closer and closer and closer towards scoring territory. And ultimately, that's what happened. I think the biggest mistake that Coach Dable made in this game was in overtime. They won the coin flip and chose to receive. And instead of kicking it away and trusting your defense, which, by the way, the New York Giants defense has been phenomenal the last 3 weeks. Instead of trusting your defense to stop Zach Wilson and give yourself good field position, they took the ball, basically ran it 3-4 times, including, even though 2 of those plays were passes to Saquon for 1 yard. And then they gave the ball right back to the Jets in 47-yard line. Very quickly, they were in field goal position and won the game. So it was ugly, but it was so bad, it was actually entertaining. That makes sense.
Well, you can say that. You're a Giants fan because you actually care. You care about.
The good thing is Daniel Jones will be back next week.
Yeah, so they say. Speaking of quarterbacks being gone, I think the biggest one of those injuries that we just talked about, Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
Minnesota Vikings obviously beat Green Bay because Green Bay does not have a good quarterback either. But they had started to make this move, right? It feels like they were getting ready to take charge of that second place in the NFC North. Obviously, Detroit's now seemingly going to run away with the pretty bad division, what seems like a pretty bad division. But Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings, to me, were looking like a team that was going to be a contender. Now he's out for the year with an Achilles injury.
I mean,
bringing this kid Jaron Hall, who's a rookie out of BYU, to be their starting quarterback now. Where do you think? Because I'm not sure. Where do you think Minnesota goes from here?
So it's interesting because they had stabilized, right? I don't know if they had started to climb, but they had stabilized. And no matter what you want to think about Kirk Cousins, he's one of the top 6 or 7 quarterbacks in the NFL. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He throws for 300 yards a game. He gives his skill position players a chance. And even with Justin Jefferson going down, whatever it was 2 weeks ago with that hamstring injury, they put him on IR. Jordan Addison, he's got 7 touchdowns in the last few weeks. So they're finding ways, and it's mostly because of their quarterback to be a contender, right, in the division. And who knows how far they would have gone. The hard thing, Rondé, with rookies, and you know this, is that you just don't know. Like some of these rookies might come in and get it and be perfectly fine. Other times they could go through the growing pains and the learning curve that rookies have to go through. And so I think the challenge from Minnesota as the trade deadline is upon them, and they got to make a decision. Do you stay the course, or are you just selling off and trying to get some other assets?
So here's what I'll say about that, because going into the season, they were in a quote unquote competitive rebuild. So I don't think they make any moves. I think they look at Jaron Hall and say, this kid is 25 years old, came into the league I think he played 7 years in college, if I got that right. I think he had a redshirt year, an injury year, and a COVID year. So he's 25. Dude's been married for 5 years already, I think. Threw 51 touchdowns at BYU, his first black quarterback to start at that university. So he's a little bit more seasoned, I think, than we may think of a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
He was 3 for 4 the other night. He didn't do much when he had to come into the game. They didn't need to. They were beating up on Green Bay. But it always lends when I see a big name quarterback go down, and the Jets are a good example of this. Now Minnesota is going to be an example of this. How do you react when your star player goes down? And I've been around teams where your star player goes down or a key player goes down, and everybody wants to say next man up mentality. I don't even really know what that means, but
it means nothing with quarterbacks.
It means nothing with quarterbacks, exactly. But I don't
tackle.
Right. Exactly. Look, we won a Super Bowl with our Anthony McFarland, who was our starting D tackle opposite Warren Sapp, went down. Chuck Darby stepped in and had a great year. Then he ended up being a key contributor for us for the next couple of years. So I look at it as opportunity. And I think people don't like to hear that, because if you're the Minnesota Vikings right now, you're saying, we had a chance to try to make a run. And now we got a rookie quarterback that we know really nothing about. But it's an opportunity for the kid. And I can't wait to see him play now, because it's about that pressure. Just like the Tennessee Titans had to put in a rookie this year. We're going to talk about him later, by the way. Put in a rookie this week, and he goes out those 4 touchdown passes. So it's all about taking that opportunity, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, no, that's what it comes down to. But the challenge with quarterbacks, and we saw this with the Giants game that you talked about, you see it a little bit when there's the sudden change, like a quarterback has to come in, unless you have a veteran backup who's seen enough offense. But when you have to put in a young player as a backup quarterback, first of all, they haven't practiced all week with the ones. Maybe they have a little bit of understanding of the verbiage, but it limits what you can call. So as an offensive coordinator, you end up becoming 1 or 2 dimensional, because you don't think that he can accomplish anything. He just doesn't know what to do. And so that's the challenge of having young quarterbacks as backups, right? And it's interesting because the Jets are in that exact situation. Even though Zach Wilson is a 3rd-year player, he's still like a young backup, and it's why they're struggling offensively. I think the biggest opportunity, though, is with Will Levis, and we'll get to him in a second, in Tennessee, because he's got enormous arm talent and he seems fearless, but they're not asking him to do a lot in his first start. But he threw 4 touchdown passes, so I guess you gotta tip the hat a little bit.
Dude, how did we not start this episode 9 really going into the halfway mark? Because there's 18 weeks in the season now, people. 17 games, but there's 18 weeks. Everybody gets a bye. How do we not start this episode and not talk about the Carolina Panthers? 13-15 barn-burning win against the Houston Texans.
Which one was worse?
There are no more defeated teams in the NFL. So we got to give out our props, right?
Yeah, I mean, which one was worse, my game or that game? I mean, I think it's the number of points. Well, we had more punts than we had points. We had 24 punts. And there were only 23 points scored. I think this game might have been better. But you give credit. This was a unique game. Roger Goodell was in the house, because it's the first time, I think, in NFL history where the top 3 picks were all on one field. and it was led by the quarterback C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young.
Right.
And it's interesting because the Houston Texans, we thought they were going to struggle this season, like mightily, because they just didn't have a lot of talent. And I think C.J. Stroud surprised a lot of people early in this season with how accurate he is, with how much composure he has in the pocket. And he didn't throw an interception for 6 weeks or something like
Right.
that. And so he has the ability to lead without mastering an offense yet, which is something you laud. And on the other side, I think everybody thought that that was Bryce Young. He had played at Alabama. He had obviously tons of success. He played with mostly pros at every position, skill position and offensive line wise. So you thought that the transition would be much better there. But Frank Reich has struggled to get him with any kind of consistency. But it changed. And I think you start to see this as the year goes on with young players. Like it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line between getting it, like understanding what it takes to be a professional, versus, in my mind, my season's over in 3 weeks, because they're college players, they're first year college players. They play 11 or 12 games. And so like that fine balance of managing the attrition while, growing as your understanding of what it takes to be a professional athlete sometimes coincides really nicely. And I think that might be happening with the Carolina Panthers. I'm not saying they're doing anything in the NFC South, but I am saying I think we might start to see them play a little bit better after basically 7 weeks of nonsense.
7 weeks of bad quarterback play is what it was. Call it what it is, man. That leads you to the question, to the question, and the thought process, at least, because you talked about the surprising Houston Texans. It feels to me like every team in football, other than the Chiefs, who lost this week, the Philadelphia Eagles, is sitting around 3 to 5 wins, and that's exactly where the Houston Texans are.
Yeah.
Because there's so many upsets, so many, unexpected results in football these days, and none bigger than this week's Denver Broncos covering +7 by 22 points.
I mean, that's just the parody of the league.
Vegas has no idea. I mean, actually, they probably like this because nobody wants a 7-point favorite to win. Nobody ever your mind tells you to take Kansas City, but for what? Because that's what everybody else is going to take. The people that took Denver, and I'm sure there's some loyal fans out there that took the Denver Broncos. I don't even know what the money line was on that game. I think I had it down at some point, but I can't remember. Are pretty happy right now. It had to be over 300. It had to be.
Well, I'm sure it was, but at the end of the day, I think we've seen Kansas City be a little bit shaky at times. And you go back to week 1, they lose to the Detroit Lions. Now, again, we didn't realize how good Detroit was, but still, they're defending Super Bowl champions, losing opening night, Thursday night, to the Detroit Lions. So that was the first flag. There were some inconsistencies as the year went on, even though they were winning games comfortably. But then they played the New York Jets. Now, the Jets are like good defensively, but Zach Wilson should not be outplaying Pat Mahomes. And that's what happened in that game. I'm serious. And so, it's just like, all right, that's question mark number 2 on this Kansas City Chiefs season, this young season. They're good. Like, they're going to win a double-digit games this season, but there's always this little question mark about them.
They're playing good enough on defense to win.
Yeah, exactly. They're hanging on. They're playing good defense. They're not making a ton of mistakes until they do. And then you get a game like Denver, who hadn't beat them in 16 straight tries, and they dominate them. And so I think it's a narrative about the NFL. It's a league full of parity. There's a couple of teams that we talk about this every week who can push through their adversity and win anyways. But there's a lot of teams that are just week to week propositions. You don't know what they're going to be. It's why you see so many 3 to 4 to 5 win teams in the NFL 8 weeks into the NFL season.
Well, we're going to find out what the Denver Broncos are. They're coming off a bye this week. They're going into a bye week 9, but 3-5. They have the same record as the same number of wins, I should say, as the Raiders and the Chargers in the AFC West. So part of me says damn, Raiders and Chargers, you're not as good as the Denver Broncos. But the Denver Broncos, they've won 2 in a row, beat the Packers, beat the Chiefs.
Yeah.
They play the Bills, who, like all
They're
these
another one of those teams.
another one of these teams are that you don't really know if they're truly dominant. And the reason I bring this up is because we're all going to say, or all feel like there's a couple of dominant teams in the NFL. Chiefs, they lose. The Philadelphia Eagles almost got beat by Sam Howell again last week. And I said, put it this way: if they didn't have AJ Brown, the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't know that they would be a 6-2 football, or what are they? 7-1 football team right now. You can make the argument AJ Brown's the best wide receiver in football. It's actually pretty easy to make that argument.
I would argue Tyreek Hill.
Well, so that's the only argument, right? Those two are the two that are dominating the narrative right now. But Philadelphia Eagles, and first of all, I think Jalen Hurts is hurt. I think there's something ailing him. They won't talk about it, whether it's his knee, whether it's whatever else, just a general, wear and tear of the last couple of seasons on this dude. But I see him get out of the pocket, whereas before it was just an explosion of, power as a runner and that threat, which actually makes their running game go. It's not there. So if I'm a team playing the Philadelphia Eagles right now, I don't think I'd play for Jalen Hurts to run. I mean, the threat's always there, and it's what makes them dangerous. But he's a pocket passer. When he gets out of the pocket, he's looking to get down, dude. He's not going by anybody anymore. But this conversation, why are the Washington Commanders like the wheel wagon for Philadelphia? Yeah. Sam Howell started this game 7 for 7, a touchdown, and then had one incompletion going into halftime with 2 touchdowns. And they never were trailing until, in the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden, obviously, the tails turned.
I mean, but the reality is, though, Sam Howell's a good quarterback.
Well, we talked about this last week. They made adjustments to their play calling. Finally, Eric Bieniemy decided, you know what, we don't have Pat Mahomes. We don't have all these other guys. I know I want us to be stuck in this system that I know, but the reality is Sam Howell's not that guy. And so the ball came out quick. Better decisions, easier completions for him, and he had almost a career day against Philadelphia this weekend. And so we'll see how that translates for them going forward too.
Yeah, well, the challenge that I think that Eric Bieniemy faces is that he doesn't trust his run game at all, and I know that there's some good players, like Brian Robinson's a good runner, Antonio Gibson as well, even though he has some fumbling issues, and so he wants to throw the football all the time. And when you do that, Sam Howell tends to want to make plays throwing the football. So what he does is he hangs. He's like, I know that Terry McLaurin's going to win. I know that Jahan Dotson is going to win here. I know that Curtis Samuel, he's going to win. All these are good names, by the way. Logan Thomas, all really good players, all these guys. So he trusts that they're going to win. But the problem is that if they take an extra half a second to win, Sam Howell's getting sacked because their offensive line has they're such a liability.
Only one sack this week, and it was at the end.
I know, but going into this game, 3 of their 5 offensive linemen were in the top 5 of pressures allowed in the NFL. 3 on one team. So I think that Eric realizes, okay, I can design these big plays, but I need to design plays that get the ball out of Sam Howell's hands. And the reason you do that is so you can get first downs. Their biggest problem is that they can't stay on the field. And if Eric Bieniemy has found a solution, they still didn't run the ball, by the way. I think they have 12 carries or something like that.
Nothing.
So if they can find a way to throw to run, basically keep the change short, and they can convert first downs, then you give Sam Howell the opportunity to be this big time thrower that he can be at times.
By the way, Washington Commanders +3 at New England this week. What are they? +140 if you want it.
I mean, that's a bet to take because they don't feel like they should be the dog.
Right.
If you watch them both, they don't feel like they should be, but they obviously are the dog. By the way, Ronde, you know what's coming up in February? The biggest game of the NFL season. You can win a trip to the
What's the name of the game? The big game? Let's just call it the big game.
game. You can win a trip to the biggest football game of the year, courtesy of Superbook Sports. Superbook will fly you and a friend to Las Vegas for February's championship game. They'll also give you 2 tickets to the game, plus a 3-night stay at the Westgate. What's the Westgate? That's home of Superbook Sports. It's sweet too. All you have to do is place a $25 same game parlay between now and January 7th, and you're automatically entered to win. You don't gotta do anything. Just place the bet. $25 same game parlay between now and January 7th. So wager and win a super trip to Las Vegas, courtesy of Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Not valid in Tennessee and Nevada. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Welcome back to Ronde and Tiki, presented by Superbooks. I gotta tell you what, Tiki, Monday Night Football this week was actually a good game. Finally a good game, like a really good game. And not just because the Detroit Lions had a bounce back game against the Raiders, who now have the same record as the Denver Broncos. Because without saying, they're not a good team. However, I think we saw the emergence of one of the top running backs in the draft finally get his due. And it's the perfect time to bring this up, because I really want to talk about what teams can you trust in the NFC. And Detroit's certainly one of them. But Jahmyr Gibbs' breakout game, 26 carries, 152 yards, a touchdown. This is the first rookie. I had to look this up. Somebody saw this, and then I looked it up. First rookie since 1989 to rush for 100 yards and have 30 yards receiving. And the last person to do that was on the same team in 1989.
Mary Sanders.
That would be
is a dude.
That's a dude. So I got a question for you before we start this conversation about the NFC. What is it that you like about Jahmyr Gibbs? I like his ability to slash, obviously his explosion, all those traits that you can go look up about him. But what is it that you're running back, you know this, you know how this works. What is it that makes him special?
So I know this only because Dan Campbell is my dude. And when he drafted him,
I didn't know that. You've never said that in any of these.
Dan told me that he wants it. Like, they have Dave Montgomery, who's a stud.
Right.
Dave Montgomery's got an injury issue right now, so he's out. And it's almost like they didn't miss a beat. So a lot of running backs, and you'll notice this, Rondé, a lot of running backs, they actually don't want it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, they'll go get 3 carries, maybe they break one for 15 yards. Like, they're tapping themselves out. Like, give me a break. Jahmyr Gibbs is like, bro, if you don't need someone else in here, I'm staying in here. And that's how I used to play, right? Don't take me out unless you need somebody else in the game. So what do I love most about Jahmyr Gibbs is that if you're going to give it to him 15 times, touches, that's passing, rushing, and receiving, he's going to make the most out of it. If you're going to give him 30 touches, he's going to say, bring it on. Right? There's not a lot of guys like that in the NFL. They just accept this stupid, ridiculous narrative that running back by committee is the best way to go in the NFL, which I would argue against, because the only way to make impactful, destroy the confidence of the opposing team's defense play is to get 3 yards, get 4 yards, get 1 yard, get 8 yards, hit them for 40. Hit him for 60, right? And you're not going to do that getting 3 carries a quarter, right? So you have to feed a guy. And I know it's an old narrative and people have forgotten it, but you see what happens when you do. And Dan Campbell is that dude. He did it with Dave Montgomery before Jahmyr Gibbs, took over the role because David's hurt. Dan Campbell wants to do it the old school way, and I love it.
Yeah, you nailed it. He's got 4 explosive. They got 6 explosive runs on the year, Detroit. 4 of them are his.
Yeah.
5.3 yard average. I mean, obviously he doesn't have as many carries as Dave Montgomery, but you got to imagine after this performance, he will. I'll tell you what I like about him. And you and I both watch a lot of film. There was the touchdown run on Monday night. He It
That was
was
the
it,
dumbest run. That was the stupidest run you'll ever see.
it was supposed to go to left side, right? It was a gap run, supposed to come
Yeah,
back,
it was
come
inside. It
back
was
out to the
inside. Yeah,
left side,
it was
and
inside zone.
he found that sliver of space and decided to go through it and jumped over a dude. He didn't like stumble over his own feet going through this hole. I mean, I don't know that you could actually fit a full body through there, and he got through and obviously burst to the end zone. So when I notice good running backs, Christian McCaffrey does this. We talk about Christian all the time, is because I like how he does this. I see so many running backs run with their head in the hole instead of looking at the person that has the ability to tackle them. And
Yeah.
when I saw Jahmyr Gibbs make that cut for that touchdown, I was like, he was looking at that dude, that linebacker in front of him that was scraping over the top where the play was supposed to go. And he said, you know what? Hell with it. Left foot in the ground, R2, touchdown. And not a lot of guys can do that. To me, that makes you special. And
Well,
he's special.
it's an awareness. And so it's funny because Saquon did this in my game. And he did it, Jahmyr did it with two of his guys. Like both his guys were blocking. So
Right.
he had his guys' backs to him. So he slipped through his guys' backs. So the defenders were on the outside of his two guys, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was no one threatening to tackle him. Saquon had one where he just like bodied into the defender, like the guy who was trying to tackle him, because there was two guys collapsing. So he bodied into one, and it caught the guy by surprise, stayed on his feet, and just kept running. Right?
We're not talking about Saquon.
I know, but I'm just saying certain guys have special skill sets, and Saquon is one of those. I mean, he's rookie of the year last year. He was 1,400 yards rushing. Jahmyr Gibbs has that it's like a non-coachable feel.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
On how to like make big plays happen, and not very many people have it.
That's exactly what it is. So, of those NFC teams, to get back on track here, Detroit, good argument as any to be the most trusted team in the NFC. 49ers, free fall. They have a bye, week 9. Seattle, dude, we got to start talking about Seattle. You know they're serious. They traded for your guy, Leonard Williams, the other day. So you know they're putting in a push. By the way, the Seattle play at the Ravens. -5.5, 43. I think they're no what the line
is 43.
Yeah, 43. Dallas, they're as good as anybody, but are they reliable? They play at Philly. That is the game of the week this week. I don't know what time that's on. It might be. I think it's probably a 1:00 game. And then obviously Philly. So of those 5 teams, I'm narrowing it down to 5 right now. Obviously, there's some people on the periphery of that. Of those 5 teams, Detroit, San Francisco, Seattle, Dallas, and Philly in the NFC. A quick answer here, Tiki, because I know you can bloviate. Who is the most reliable of those?
It's got to be Philly. Philly doesn't play great football all the time, and their one loss came against one of the best defenses, even though statistically it's not.
Right.
The Jets forced them into turnovers. Jalen Hurts got confused by some of the things that Jeff Ulbrich was doing, showing man coverage, and it was actually 3, kind of like what Tampa used to do, right? Like your interception. Looks like, is that man? Oh, he's free, but Jalen Hurts is a small quarterback. So when you zone dog him, so you bring pressure in his face, sometimes he doesn't see what's happening behind that pressure. So he threw his 3rd interception against the Jets because of the scheme. Yet they still win games when bad things happen for them. I think they're one of the best coached teams in the NFL. And if I was going 1, it would be Philly. 2, I would say Detroit. Dallas, I don't trust. Seattle, I think is overachieving a bit. And the 49ers, after losing 3 in a row, I think we're seeing that Brock Purdy, while a good prospect, is just an average quarterback.
Right. I think Brock Purdy is average talent, above average, maybe even like great level anticipation in his throws, much like Tua.
Yeah.
And Tua doesn't jump off the page with you talent-wise, but his ability to know where and how to throw footballs makes him good. I think that's Brock. 49ers are not the same without Deebo Samuel. Without that variability in their scheme and ability to use interchangeable parts, which is Kyle Shanahan's offense, you can tell that they are not the same team.
Yeah.
Seattle is the one. It's between Detroit and Seattle for me is number 2, because I agree with you. Phillies did just find ways to win. They're better than whomever they're playing. It doesn't matter. They find a way to be better than whomever they're playing. Detroit and Seattle, I think, is the argument right now. And the fact that Detroit got blown out by the Ravens is the only reason it gives me pause to not put them at number 2. Because I think Seattle has a little bit of that Pete Carroll, you know what, nobody believes in us mentality, and he imparts it on his team. And there's something about the way that they find ways to win. Because they should have won that game last week, but they found a way. They found a way to win. Touchdown at the end of the game to Jackson. What's his? How do you say his middle?
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, Smith and Jigba. There you go. Thank you, Tiki. I knew you knew that. You do college football, so I know you'd know that. But that touchdown at the end of the game, like, that was kind of improbable. And that's kind of me, like, Philly. Like, they're good enough on defense, like really good on defense. They're good enough on offense, and they find ways to win football games. And it's Pete Carroll. That's what separates them from me.
The only thing that worries me about them is that they go into these lulls where it's like they get comfortable. It's just like they play great, and it's like, all right, we're good, and they're comfortable. And it's like, oh crap, we got to win this game. Like they scored how many points in 31?
Yeah.
Right? They scored 24. It was 24. And then they didn't score for whatever it was, 2.5 quarters. So it's like they get comfortable with themselves. Whereas when I watch Detroit, you just feel like there's always pressure. Right? Yeah. They're just always pushing down on you. And so that's the edge.
Well, they were winning that game against Cleveland. It was 14-0. And then the next thing you know, it was 20-17. And they had control of that game, and then all of a sudden they were losing, and they had to make that last push, and they were able to. All right, Tiki, segment 3 coming up. Ask you, ask me. We got some good ones in this one, including talking about a rookie quarterback and who's going to win the very mediocre NFC South. We'll be right back.
Yeah, before you do that,
do your read.
Before you do that, refer a friend and earn a $50 bonus this season with Superbook Sports. Superbook is the most trusted name in sports wagering, and you don't want to miss their Refer a Friend bonus. All you need to do is click on the Refer a Friend link under the profile in Superbook's app. Share the promo code with your friends, and you'll get a $50 bonus for everyone who registers using your code. So, win money wagering and then win money referring this season with Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, last segment here on Ronde and Tiki presented by Superbook. My question is first, but I want to go you first, Ronde, because the NFC South is average. Let's say that. That's the best way. I want to be kind. It's average. The Saints are at home versus the Chicago Bears, a game that I am calling, heading down to New Orleans in a couple of days. And they are 7.5-point favorites. But that's just the starting story. Who's the best team in the NFC South?
I think you're asking the question, are the Saints the best team in the NFC South? Saints, 4-4, Falcons, 4-4, Buccaneers have already had their bye. They're 3-4. We know for a fact it's not the Carolina Panthers, even though they just won their first game. Congratulations, Frank Reich, yada, yada. Are they the best? Right now, I got to say probably yes.
The Saints.
For a reason. And a couple of reasons, actually. First off, that they play the Chicago Bears at home. That's a win. Next week, they play the Minnesota Vikings without Kirk Cousins. That's likely a win. Then they play the Falcons. So I'm looking at a team that is staring 3 straight wins straight in the gourd. And the fact that Derek Carr is actually playing good football right now is pretty exciting if you're a New Orleans Saints fan. All those explosive plays last week were kind of out of the ordinary because they've been so up and down. But they beat the Colts this week 37-27, and Rashid Shaheed might be the fastest receiver in football other than Tyreek Hill. When they push the ball, no matter how and when they push the ball down the field to him, he's running by somebody. So they have that element. And then obviously Alvin Kamara is really starting to come on. He had a touchdown, receiving, rushing last week. He's a great prop bet going as he's getting back on track into the season. And then on top of that, they have a top 5 defense in total yards and a top 10 defense in points. So I think really just by default, because the rest of the NFC South is so, mediocre, laden with flaws, it has to be the New Orleans Saints. So if you believe in me, there's 7.5 this week at home against Chicago. I mean, obviously Chicago doesn't even know who's playing quarterback. If it's a rookie or
Tyson
coming back.
Tyson Bagent. Don't sleep on Tyson Bagent. Tyson Bagent.
The guy that would be a high school teacher.
Yes, no, he'd be a CrossFit. He'd be a CrossFit a stud and also a teacher. So by the way, Tyson Bagent from Shepherd University. It's a D2 school. He has the NCAA record for touchdowns, 159, and the D2 record for passing yards in a career, 17,034.
So that means
throw the ball.
So that means nothing in the NFL. But thanks for letting all the bettors know that Tyson Bagent.
He's the first D2 player to start in I don't know how many years in an NFL game. I think it's been a long time.
All right, I have a more poignant question for you, Tiki Barber. Here we go. This is the question we've been promising you. Will Levis starts his career, gets his first start. Tennessee throws for 250-something yards. I don't even know what the number was, but 4 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. So is Will Levis a better option at quarterback right now than Ryan Tannehill, who is out right now with some sort of ankle injury, I believe?
Yeah, it feels like he is, but I don't know if he is. So if you go back and watch that game, which I did, Will Levis has an enormous arm. Kid is confident as hell. He's big, can make any throw. Right, he threw this corner route to I think it was Westbrook Kenny, and he was falling backwards and placed it so perfectly. Like it's like his deep ball is beautiful. But here's what happened last weekend is that they got challenged because you had a young quarterback in man coverage, and you do that. I don't care who you're playing. Will Levis has the arm to outthrow your man coverage, and so he did that. So it was like watching bubble screens and checkdowns and then bombs, right? That's what it was the whole time. If they can get their run game going and Derrick Henry turns back into Derrick Henry that you feared every single week, then I think that Will Levis is your guy because you can just run the ball and then do play action and throw bombs because that's what he's equipped to do right now. Because he's still in that learning phase. So I'm going to say yes if the run game gets right, but if their run game is what it's been all season long, then Ryan Tannehill is your better option because he's a better quarterback right now, even though Will Levis looks like one because he threw for 4 touchdowns last weekend. DeAndre Hopkins just went crazy on Atlanta.
Yes. So the person who's most happy about Will Levis being quarterback for the Tennessee Titans is DeAndre Hopkins.
No doubt.
Ryan Tannehill had 2 touchdowns all year long. Will Levis doubled that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at some point, Ronde, you just have to throw the ball.
Right.
Just throw it. Right. Trust DeAndre Hopkins, who doesn't nearly have the speed that he once did, but he still wants to be a playmaker. And if he's got one-on-one coverage, he's going to beat whoever he's playing because he's such a good route runner.
All right, let's get to the games. All right, there's 4 good ones this week, Tiki. Miami at KC in the early window, 9:30 in Frankfurt, Germany. It's going to be a great game. Miami is, Kansas City is -2.5, 50.5 over under if you're looking at that game. The other good game we've already talked about, Seattle at Baltimore, -5.5 to Baltimore, 43 over under.
Dude, I don't know how you take Kansas City in this game. I really don't. Kansas City's coming from the Midwest. I don't know when they're leaving. I mean, who
They're
knows?
probably already there. They're definitely
They probably are there. Miami, it's a shorter trip,
right.
but Miami feels like they have a offense that could they could go play in, I don't know, in the backyard here and then figure out how to put up 30 points a game. And it's funny because if you look at what they try to do, and it's simple, it's not complicated, right? You're scheming guys open and just letting them be athletes. And I know we had that conversation earlier about AJ Brown with the Philadelphia Eagles, who was the best player. I think that Tyreek Hill is one of those guys who at 1,000 yards through 8 games, he should be competing for the MVP. So Kansas City, Miami is the game. It's really the game of the week. It's a shame it's the early game.
I would argue against you on that. The game of the weeks are the two games we're going to talk about. Number one, Bills at Bengals. So my game this week that I'm taking a look at. Bengals come off obviously a huge win on the road at San Francisco, 31-17. We've been waiting for this team to kind of look like the team that they're supposed to be. Actually, I think we were all doubting them at the beginning of the year, thinking that they were done. Since then, they've run off 3 straight victories. Joe Burrow throws for, I think he has 4 incompletions the other day, 3 touchdowns. They look like the team to beat. Obviously, I watched the Bills play the Bucs at home this past week. Bengals are -3 favorites. Bills +130 on the money line. And if I'm looking at this game, I think a week ago I would have said this was who cares game. I just didn't trust either team. Now I trust the Bengals way more than I trust the Bills. The Bills defense, despite what is now becoming evident that they're not going to be as good with the injuries that they have, they just don't put teams away. Tampa had a chance to win that game at the end. They got a late touchdown, and then they got a stop on defense. Tampa did, and then they're a Hail Mary away from losing that football game. And actually, if you look at the Hail Mary, it probably should have been caught. So if it's me, I'm looking at Bengals +3. That seems perfect number because obviously it's going to be a close game. But the way Joe Burrow's playing, the way he's finding Ja'Marr Chase, who had 12 targets the other day and 10 receptions, T. Higgins, he's the guy that's now finally looking like the quarterback that we expected him to be. And Josh Allen's still playing the hero. And so I'm going to take the Bengals here.
You mean the Bengals laying -3?
Yeah, -3. Yeah, that's what I said. -3, dude.
You said plus, but it's okay. I know what you meant. The Eagles hosting the Cowboys. Now, we talked about them already. It feels like the Eagles they just find ways to win because they're so balanced. Look, they're getting a little bit older. Like they're not the same team that was there last year. They went to the Super Bowl. You mentioned it with Jalen Hurts. Like there's something a little bit off, maybe physically with him. And so he's trying to be more of a pocket passer. Be honest, Ronnie, that might just be coaching, right? They might just be telling him, don't go get yourself injured because if you do, you know what happens. You're effed. And you don't want to practice theft, right? So I think that the Eagles at home against the Cowboys, who have been up and down, right? There's some games where they just look completely lost. There's other games where they look like world beaters, like last week. They scored 30 points. And the difference with Dallas is that for whatever reason, they've always believed that CeeDee Lamb operated best in the slot. Right, so they keep him in the slot. You get the mismatch, whether it's a linebacker or a nickel. That's an easier throw for Dak. It felt like they were misusing him, and especially when you see it compared to last week. Last week they put him outside. They used him as a true X. And when you have a big player like that, even if he's not beating guys with speed, he can beat you with his body, right? And he's a competitor. And so I think the Cowboys might have happened upon something with their best wide receiving talent that changes what their narrative is as it pertains to the inconsistency in offense. With that said, I still like Philly until Philly proves that they can't play poorly and still win, which is what they've done a lot of times this year. I like Philly here, laying 6 at home in particular. It's tough to go to Philadelphia and play. I know it's not the Vet, but it is still a tough place to show up and put on a good performance. So give me the Eagles hosting the Cowboys, laying 3.
Yes. As I say, you said 6. It's 3, dude.
Yeah. Did I?
Yes, you did.
I don't think I did.
Yes, you did.
Maybe I did. It's still.
All right. Miami, Kansas City. You like Miami. Bills, Bengals. I like Bengals. Cowboys, Eagles. You like Eagles.
That does it for week number 9. Week number 10, I should say, but week 9 of the NFL of Rondé and Tiki, presented by Superbook. We'll see you next week.
The Rondé and Tiki podcast is produced by Superbook Sports. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in Colorado, Maryland, Nevada, New Jersey, Ohio, and Tennessee. In Iowa, call 1-800-BETS-OFF or visit 800betsoff.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342.